I drove up and parked near the police station in our medium-sized town. My mind was racing, and I needed to get the anger inside of me under control. I kept telling myself, keep your cool, watch your mouth, don't cross the line, don't threaten that asshole, don't be scared, make sure there are witnesses, burn the bastard. I kept telling myself, don't cross the line, don't cross the line, over and over as I walked to the entrance of the station. I walked up to this thick, bulletproof window and asked in as normal a voice as I could, "Is Officer Jenkins here? I'd like to talk to him." The female officer outside the window asked, "What is the reason for this?" "I'm trying to save his life." It caught her attention. 2 minutes later, this arrogant shit was standing in front of me and smiling as if he recognized me. "Officer Jenkins, I'm David Smith. I assume you know my wife?" Now his smile turned into a grin. I can see the word cook wanting to come out of his mouth. "How can I help you, Mr. Smith?" I thought to myself, I'm going to wipe that smirk off your face, you worthless bastard. In the calmest, most harmless voice I could manage, as if I was reading the news, I said, "I'm here to save your life, although to be honest, it's probably too late. You're almost dead already." He didn't take the news very well. "Are you threatening me?" He put his hand on the gun when 3 of his police friends heard his words and headed in our direction. "Damn coward." I raised my voice a little so his friends could hear. "Not at all. You've already committed suicide. I just want to make sure you don't kill anyone else." His friends gathered around me, and the female officer behind the glass was watching everything that was happening. I let my voice return to a normal, non-threatening level. "You see, I saw you leaving my house this morning. When I went inside, I found that the bed I usually sleep on had been ripped open, and you had left several liquid stains on the sheets. My wife told me your name, but now that I see you, I recognize you as the guy who used her. So I owe it to you to make sure that you understand all the consequences of what you've done. If you hit her, you coward, I'll rot you. I'll get you out and make you disappear." An interesting threat. I can only assume that your friends here are not involved in your plans to break the law. However, I did not raise my hand against her and I am not threatening you. I'm just doing my civic duty so that no one dies unnecessarily, except, I suppose, the 2 of you. But there's nothing I can do about it right now. His cop buddies were crowding around me now. "You see, my wife is infected." His friends took a step back. "About a year and a half ago, I returned home early from a business trip, as I did this morning, and found her with the guy she works with. I kicked her out and divorced her. About a year later, she tested positive for HIV. The woman she lived with, just a friend from work, kicked her out of the apartment, and her parents disowned her. She showed up at my door with her bag in her hand, begging me to take her in. Well, she was my ex-wife by then, but it's still hard to turn away from all those years together. So I let her stay in my guest room. I'll give her her due. For the first time in her life, she told me the truth. She told me about the positive test result. Needless to say, I haven't used her once since the day I threw her out. I do not know when she caught the virus, but I have been tested several times, and so far I still have a negative result. You can't be too careful, right?" By this time, his buddies had taken 2 more steps back, giving Officer Jenkins and me plenty of room, but they were listening intently. "So here's the thing. As far as I know, my ex hasn't made love in at least 6 months. She is an avid liar and a bit narcissistic. Alcohol does not improve her veracity. I'm guessing you picked her up somewhere in a bar, or maybe somewhere else. I don't really care. Like I said, she's my ex. I just want to warn you that there is a high probability that you have contracted a virus. It takes about 6 months for it to show up in the tests, but in the meantime, you can pass it on to someone else. You're married, aren't you?" I could see by the ring on his finger that he was married. If you're making love to your wife, you really need to use a condom until the test results come back. Tell your wife you have a urinary tract infection or something. I'm sure you're already good at lying to her. I saw the hatred in his eyes. He wanted to kill me, but there were witnesses. It's good that I decided to do it at the police station. Anyway, what kind of bastard would kill the messenger? Well, I just wanted you to know. You need to start getting tested. I doubt my ex will tell you. I nodded, turned, and walked to the door. Have a nice day. Driving away from the station, I couldn't help but smile on my face. My wife was not HIV positive, and she was not my ex-wife yet. It will be, of course, but later. I was honest when I told Officer Jenkins that my wife was unfamiliar with the truth, although I was not entirely honest when I told him that he was infected with AIDS. Well, a little lie. It's on my conscience. For the first few miles, I looked in the rearview mirror, wondering if Officer Jenkins or his friends would follow me. I think they had more important things to do. It was funny to think about the chaos at the station. 20 minutes later, I stopped by my favorite diner to meet up with friends. I sent them a message this morning. I have friends like that who are always ready to eat together at the diner. We preferred breakfast, but at least lunch would do. We used to sit and talk, make bad jokes, and exchange insults. My friends knew me too well, and in the middle of the meal they asked me what was bothering me. Taking a deep breath, I told them, if you can't tell your friends about your problems, who can you tell? I've always said that having lunch with friends can be the best therapy a guy can get, and that day they proved that I was right. They supported me like men, and I knew that their wives would support me too. The rest of the meal was a little gloomy, but I knew I wasn't alone. They told me they'd have my back if dishonest Officer Jenkins came after me. I admit, I drove home feeling much better than I did when I left this morning. It didn't last long. When I got home, there were police cars scattered on the street and a swarm of blue lights on my property. Great. I thought they were coming for me. I was stopped by an officer who seemed to recognize me. Mr. Smith, could you park here and get out of your car? I have to tell you that people know where I am, and I had lunch with 5 witnesses if you're planning something. Sir, could you please get out of the car? I got out, stood by my car, and waited. Eventually, a fat detective in a cheap suit came up to me. Mr. Smith, could you tell me where you were today? As you probably know, I went to the police station this morning. Then I went to a diner to have lunch with friends. I have witnesses who will confirm that I was there. I would like to know their names, but you are not currently under suspicion. So can you tell me what's going on? Or are you going to keep me in limbo? Neighbors report that shortly before noon, Officer Jenkins drove across your front lawn and crashed his patrol car into your porch. Then he entered your house. We assume that there was some kind of confrontation. We have a pretty good idea of what they were arguing about, since your performance at the station this morning did not go unnoticed. The neighbors heard 2 shots. We found your wife and Officer Jenkins dead in the living room. His service revolver was fired twice. My wife was dead, and that bastard was watching me to see my reaction. He tried to spin it as best he could to shield the police from any responsibility. You can't live half your adult life with a woman and not feel anything when you're told she's just been murdered. For the second time today, I was overwhelmed by anger and grief. I intended to divorce her, but I didn't want her to die. She's not really your ex-wife, is she? You're not really divorced, are you? No. And all this was just a performance at the station this morning, designed to get back at Jenkins, wasn't it? I looked into his eyes and said nothing. Well, I think you got back at them both. Congratulations. If I had my way, I would lock you up, but technically what you did is not against the law. It's just something you have to live with. I'll be fine. I'm not a murderer. I'm not like your Officer Jenkins, who shot a woman in cold blood. It didn't take an experienced detective to read the expressions on the faces of the policemen standing around us. It was the second time today that I was glad to have witnesses. I watched as the ambulance took 2 gurneys out of the house, each with a body bag on it. I had nothing to do there, so I got back in my car and headed to my lawyer's office. After all, I didn't need this divorce anymore, but I better be prepared in case someone decides that lying is a bigger crime than murder.